We are live. Asia Tech Podcast. This is Asia Matters. Graham Brown in the Asia Tech Podcast studio, joined by Cheryl Liew. Cheryl, welcome.
Thank you, Graham.
It's great to have you on the other side of the mic today.
Yes, it's a pleasure, I think.
Great. And we're going to talk about, well, you've just come back from Hong Kong as well, just today. So
Yes, I have.
thank you for coming.
Oh, it's a pleasure. The challenge of the rain, but yeah, we're going to have some fun tonight.
Excellent. That's Cheryl, Steve Stein. Welcome.
A pleasure.
No, I think people may be familiar with you because you're a familiar voice in the world of podcasting, the Inside Asia podcast.
It's within Asia and a bit in North America, I suspect.
Yeah. No, but you're a well-known figure. People seem to know
So
you.
are you, Graham.
Well, we're not going to compete. I think you're more well-known than me. You've been at it longer than me, though. You've been a reporter for years, though,
A
haven't you?
long time.
Yeah.
Coming back to it, full circle.
Yeah. Wall Street Journal, wasn't it, where you started?
Originally, that's right. Yeah.
Great. So we have the reporter and the power woman.
Excellent combination
It is.
today.
Nothing can go wrong. So we're going to talk about the big stories in Asia this week. So as the format goes with Asia Matters, what happens is I ask the guests to bring in the stories that are interesting, the stories that cross your social media feed. We want to know what matters right now. This week's going to be quite interesting because we are diving into the world of AI and the world of humanity as well. So we're going to balance these out. We're going to talk about tyranny. We're going to talk about innovation and Snickers bars all in one.
Wow.
How about that? Shall we start at the top? I want to talk about this story. This is a light intro. I'm sure there is a word for that in the world of journalism, to bring the audience on board with an easy starter. Alibaba. So we all know Alibaba, Jack Ma, funny face guy who you see, a very friendly front of technology, isn't he? He's out
Absolutely.
there. And we're getting to like him outside of China now. So he's quite a sort of a very personable face of Alibaba. Interestingly here is that there's a story, and this is in Bloomberg, about how Alibaba used shoppers' data to invent a spicy Snickers bar. You know, we all like the sound of this already, right? But the interesting thing about this is that they went to Mars, and this is not just a one-off. They have what they call a new manufacturing strategy, where they gather the billions of data sets that they have across the shopping platform, the payments, you know, the physical retail, everything. And they use it in their market research arm, which is called T-Mall Innovation Center. They crunch all this data. And then they go to the Marses of this world and they say, hey, look, it takes you 3 years to come up with a product. We can get that down to 6 months. And we know your customer better than you. And they come up with a spicy Snickers bar. How about that?
Well, they come up with it, or they've tested it. I mean, do they know in fact it's going to play, or in theory it's going to be a great tasting spicy Snicker bar?
Well, I imagine they must have tested it if they're going to go to Mars and say, you know,
with confidence.
With confidence, yeah. No, we've run tests on this. So, and in fact, it's not just Mars. I mean, they've gone to, for example, Unilever, and so here's an interesting example. Taking that Snickers example, and this is how you use big data and AI, right? In real world examples. So what Alibaba saw was a lot of people searching for anti-pollution products. This is China, right? And they then came up with the insight that what happens if you then created a range of beauty products for women around this, right? So they took what normally would be a 3-year cycle in developing cosmetics and got it down to 6 months. They went to Unilever and pitched the idea and came up with this Purify line, which is apparently a bestseller
Today, so it works.
Yeah,
Prove it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's just phenomenal where that's going, that, you know, that sort of access to big data. But where in this article it gets interesting, and this is a criticism which kind of leads into some of the other stories tonight, is that they're saying, well, they have all this access to data that we don't have outside of China because Chinese consumers are readily giving up their identity and their data and all that kind of like behavioral information. Whereas you try and do that in the US, it won't work. What are your thoughts on this story? Any kind of takeaways at this early stage? It's a very innocent story. I'll pitch it at the beginning.
Well, I think the way that we do tests, etc., is going to be hugely different. The data is available anywhere. So now instead of having a hypothesis and then you test it, basically it's let the data tell you what what to lead, and then basically that cuts down on your whole cycle time.
Yeah.
And we have seen that happening again and again and again, that this is going to be the way forward now that data is so readily available.
But this is happening, isn't it? I mean, everywhere, the lean startup model. That's
Yes.
what we're preaching, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you just need to have a few billion data sets to be able to make this work.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
it helps, right?
if there are enough women out there searching for anti-pollution,
Yeah.
that that's enough of a niche market in the first place to start with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you think about how this applies. They're talking about manufacturing. We're seeing this applied to retail. There's a lot of talk of new retail in China at the moment. And how have you visited any of the stores in
The
China?
Hema and all.
Right, you've been to the
Yes.
Hema store. What was your impression of that?
Oh, I bet you I bought a lot more than I had intended.
Right.
With the online and offline kind of synergy.
Yeah.
Same for Amazon Books. I was there,
Yeah.
in the US. I bought a lot more than I would have on Amazon.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the actual physical retail store like for you? I mean, a lot of people outside of Asia are not really aware of how far advanced that's got now.
It's indistinguishable from any other retail outlet. We did a podcast on it a year ago,
Right.
where I took a stroll through the Hema department store, picked things up, asked questions, took footage. So it was almost kind of a live walkthrough, if you will.
Oh,
and then I
awesome.
decided to mess with them when we got to the end. I asked if I could pay in cash, and of course they were flustered, had no idea because
Right,
everything's
right.
digital. But to their credit, they ran in the back, found somebody with a bag of cash, came in out, gave
wow.
change, and then that didn't work. So the person behind the register said, "I'll pay on my phone. You pay me back in cash," and that's how we resolved the issue. But it's a brilliant concept, and it's lightning fast, and they stock only what they need. It's kind of a just-in-time replenishment. So it's actually not overstocked displays, but very targeted and focused. So it's great for retail square footage.
It uses a lot of the lessons and the learnings from internet marketing as well, and applies them in store. In the same way you would like take a landing page on a website and take that kind of like mindset. They apply that to how they use displays.
Yes.
So, it's no different. In that sort of old world retail model is sort of going away, which I suppose we're going to come back to that later on about the human aspect in sales.
But if you were to visit a whole food store,
Yeah.
you will find the bars exactly where they would want you to see it, and then you just pick it up exactly the same as Hema. You just walk through, and then your basket fills up without you knowing it.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I know. Whole Foods is scary on its own, right? You can never walk out of there without spending a few $1,000s on bars or whatever it might be. All right, we're going to move on. I mean, that's the first story. I'm going to introduce my second story and then open it up to you guys, the stories that you brought. Slightly a different angle. Here's a story, and if you've just come back from Hong Kong, they've just opened the Hong Kong Zhuhai Macau Bridge, which is the longest bridge in the world. And it's an engineering marvel, etc. But the interesting thing about this is there's two stories here. There's one about the Greater Bay, those 11 cities in that Pearl River Delta, which are emerging as the biggest city in the world, the mega city. And then the border facial recognition tests that they're running at the moment, which is just interesting because, they have the ability to do it, but they have a lot of people going through there on a regular basis, a lot of traffic. So basically, you can go through the Hong Kong Zhuhai Bridge without a passport, just by your face. And I find that quite interesting. And you can choose to queue in the old school, like pay the cash line, right?
Yeah.
There's a bit of a negotiation going on here. Or you can put your face on the database and go through. And this applies to Hong Kong residents as well. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think, that's great, all good? Do you see any issue with this?
How quickly do you move through? Do you have to stop, pause, stare into some orb and wait for somebody to say you are released? How does that work?
Yeah, the gates open maybe and you're out.
But is it a...
At
I
this
don't know.
moment,
I mean, I'd like to know.
Yeah.
If it was a matter of a few seconds, that'd be interesting.
Because is that really any different from what you do in Singapore when you come through passport control with your passport thumb and you're through within, 40 seconds? 30 seconds? Pretty fast. So I guess the only point on this is if it's more efficient, great. If not, it's just another way of picking a body part and deciding that, you can go through. Right?
Is it that innocuous?
I don't know. Oh, of course not. You want to go there. You want to go to the dark stuff now.
We're edging
Okay,
around the edge of the dark side. I mean, it says here, so the company behind it says that the AI-backed facial recognition can complete clearance within a second. So there's your answer. With an accuracy rate of 99.5%.
So basically, it's just a drive-through.
Right. It is a drive-through, right?
Yeah, it's just drive-through. You don't even need to pause and put your thumbprint on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about that? That's amazing.
I wonder if you have to smile. You know, if it's,
maybe that gets you thrown out.
Right.
Exactly. Don't smile, whatever you do.
We don't want happy people. Yeah.
But it's amazing, that whole sort of, that Greater Bay that's coming together. So those that don't know, the 11 cities in that Pearl River Delta, they reckon 65 million people.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible.
And it's part of, there's part of this mega civil engineering project. You have these bridges. It's going to be, you know, all of this is going to be held together with that glue of AI and big data, smart cities, and so on. And I wonder in 10 years' time, when visitors come from the West Coast, the US, and they fly into the Greater Bay, they think, oh my God.
Oh, I have not been back to Shenzhen in 30 years. And when I went there, I was a cub reporter with the Journal. I crossed over $5 a day. And all I did was walk around these muddy flats with a few brick buildings, knocking on doors, asking to speak with, you know, who's in charge of this joint venture.
Right.
Sven would come out and say, I have not seen anyone in years. Let's talk.
Yeah.
And now you go back, and it's just unbelievable. It's this golden city. The transformation is like nothing the world's ever seen.
I wonder, you know, if I was a young gentleman from London moving to California, like at the turn of the 20th century or the end of the 19th century, you know, maybe even about the time of the First World War, around about that time, I would have gone to London with all my sort of preconceptions about, you know, empire and how the world should be. And I was going to California and I saw the marvels of Edison and Ford and, you know, all of that happening at the World Fair. Yeah. You know, I landed in California. I thought, I've just discovered the future. Whether that kind of effect's going to happen for, you know, kids coming out of California flying to Shenzhen.
That's a great question.
10 years, right?
Well, to me, it's surprising that we don't see more of that, because I think there's politics in play right now, which isn't making that easy.
Yeah.
The U.S. administration is trying to demonize China, which obviously is creating problems. But you'd like to see it turn around where Americans can open their eyes and see, wow, we won. We convinced them capitalism is great. These type of innovations is the way forward.
Yeah.
You know, let's celebrate in this. But instead, we're creating a Cold War enemy. I digress, but this is a concern I have about those impressions.
Well, it can be a bit scary though, can't it, as well? Because I mean, when we start talking about AI and technology in the hands of, you know, whoever it may be, then you can kind of get a bit worried, which brings us on to the next story. Tell us about it. Why technology favors tyranny? It's sort of a very loaded gun question, really, isn't it? Let's talk about this. This is an article in The Atlantic, so it's going to come with a bit of, you know, like edge as well.
Yeah, I mean, some of the listeners may know the works by Harari, Yuval Harari, who's done, he did Sapiens as his kickoff book, and then he did Homo Deus, and now he's done 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. This article is an extract from that book, and he just kind of highlights some of the key concerns that he has, which I think go into aspects of, in the old world order, it was all about the worker and the power of the workers and the importance of the workers, and therefore Workers' Party and communism and tyranny actually needed people. In the world of AI, we're shifting into another world where actually becoming irrelevant is more dangerous than becoming, being somehow thrown out or not considered. So I think he's making the point that once you combine biotech and AI, you now have the ability to pick up every sensory issue that occurs in the human body, a feeling, an emotion, an impulse, a passion, and applying then a digital response to it. Now, that's great for commercial reasons and teeing up whatever that person may want or need in the moment. But now think about the control elements in the wrong hands, how they can use that to exploit and manipulate people.
Do you think, you know, again, taking a historical perspective, we could have, you know, leveled the same kind of fears and criticisms of the machine, industrial process back in 1918, so like 100 years ago? We say, oh, look, you know, here's the machine, here's Ford and his factory. You know, oh my God, what's going to happen with the world? Is that a similar kind of feeling about it, or is it a different animal entirely?
According to Harari, and I would agree with him, it's different. It's saying now we're moving, that machines of the past replaced the muscle of men. Now we're moving into the cognitive realm, and we know nothing else. So where do humans go from here? There is no next place. I mean,
Right.
it's a battle for cognitive, and machines win hands down. I mean, it's been proven. I mean, AlphaGo, learned
right.
That's a whole story about that. But it learned how to play in just 4 hours, and it's
Yeah.
taken people lifetimes to figure out how to master the game. It's incredible and scary, but also wildly fascinating. To think what machine learning can do.
So what does that mean? I mean, when we have these conversations, it can be a bit dystopian. Does it mean, like, for us, we have to think about what kind of values we add? Does it mean that, a lot of people say that the machines are going to AI will replace some of the highly paid jobs in society. For example, if your job is essentially a spreadsheet, like a lawyer, or even a doctor, a surgeon maybe, rather than a GP. Yeah. But if you were a surgeon, that could be replaced by AI. And they've shown, for example, like when they do diagnostics, and they're diagnosing for a disease, AI can much better look at the photos of diagnostics and diagnose the disease better than a human doctor can.
Not even incremental improvement, absolute improvement.
Right.
I mean, by a multiple, and that's what's so incredible. Which is a wonderful application if somebody has early signs of cancer, a tumor or something of that sort. But again, it's not that the conversation we should all be having around this, in my opinion, isn't about technology and the capabilities of technology. It's about ethics. And unless we hard code what we're doing with some ethical capability, I'm really concerned that this is our 1936 and we're about to split the atom and nobody knows which way this is going to go. That's what keeps me up at night, Graham.
Is it really? How about you, Cheryl?
We need to go back and look at what humanity is all about in the context of all this. When you say that we might lose jobs to AI and all, well, think of it as freeing ourselves to find really the area of passion where beyond what neuroscience is teaching us right now, what exactly, are we actually capable of beyond this limitation we have been placed upon for all these centuries, right? So that's one opportunity if we were to embrace it in that manner. But really in the application of, let's say, in medicine, I think if we look at exponential medicine, AI together with what human learning and human inclination can do, is a lot more than just what AI and machine learning can sort of decipher. The inclination piece, the intuition piece, is a piece that is within us that is not easily programmable. Yeah. And that's where we need to go back to first principles. How much do we trust ourselves? How much do we trust one another? It's the humanity piece that we will not do that which is wrong or that is against the ethics of us as humanity. So I think it's not an either or. It's how can we coexist so that we can actually free ourselves to do what we truly want to do, and truly express ourselves creatively.
The promise.
Well, that's the green pasture that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Cheryl, it's well said, because I think at the end of the day, if we don't develop that trust, we don't have that human-to-human contact, we are in a situation, and maybe this is why this feels so dystopian to me now, because you look at the end of globalization, you look at the retraction of Brexit, U.S., the rise of authoritarian powers, and you start to worry that people's levels of trust are declining, not growing. If we were going the other direction, perhaps personally I would have a different feeling right now, and others I talk to about this subject, behind closed doors, they say, yeah, this is a concern for us. It's something that needs to be addressed for sure.
But who addresses it?
Well, I think it's we had the atomic. What was the what at the time of the last Cold War? We had a commission that came together to monitor and manage the growth of anti-ballistic missiles. Right. So we wouldn't blow each other up. And they had a process of getting around and discussing and managing that and keeping everyone cool. Frankly, I think we need an equivalent for AI. And I'm waiting for somebody to step forward, whether it's a government or a collective of corporates or engineers or scientists, to propose something like that. And I haven't seen it happen yet.
Yeah, I do believe it will have to be a multidisciplinary kind of group. It's not just the corporate or the governments, but it's a council, if you like, of the different pieces, the different stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
Because everybody holds a different part of the key.
Philosophers, ethicists, others. I mean, there's liberal arts thing. I mean, this is about as you rightly point out, Cheryl, humanity. We're talking about humanity and the future of humanity. So you do have to come at this in multiple angles. It's not whoever has the most money wins on this one, for sure.
I wonder how difficult it would be, because with like splitting the atom or creating a nuclear fission device, for example, you can easily identify that as an atomic weapon. However, with AI, it's not so easy. What exactly is AI if it's not just, an algorithm that can learn?
Yeah.
Or, what is that? Is it what's optimizing my Facebook feed? Is that AI? So we're in a very sort of murky territory here, right? Yeah. There's nothing actually that defines AI. And if you actually go back to the, for example, the Turing test.
Whatever that is not human would be.
Well, there you go. But how do you define
Simply.
that? Where do you start and where do you finish with that? This is the challenge, right? Because then, people can say, well, that's not AI. It's just pattern recognition.
Well, this shouldn't be the Yuval Harari show, but just to go back to him, his fear is really not so much about AI in and of itself. It's AI in the hands of people who would do wrong with AI. Whether it's facial recognition at the border to we're talking about pre-crime units, Minority Report kind of stuff, where mistakes can be made.
We were just talking about that. Yeah, it feels like that era.
Right.
No, I got the shivers, on the plane coming back, and I watched it, and I thought, some movies really tell the future better than others.
But they solved crime.
Oh, well, they did. But what happened?
But they reduced murder rate to 0, right?
Conspiracy, because look who got in trouble at the end, and he was set up to fail, right? That's the problem. The system can fail you, Graham.
There you go. I find it fascinating. I don't know if I shared it, but I was an AI graduate in 1995.
Right.
So it's been my thing for
What'd they call it then?
AI.
Did they? It wasn't like, handwriting or something? They really called it AI?
It was called artificial intelligence. It was called, it had different guises like cognitive computing or computational psychology, but it was called artificial intelligence. Yeah, it's been called that for many years.
So what do you think, watching this massive transition in this field of AI? What are your impressions?
It's interesting. I'm aware of the dystopian part of it, and I wonder how you can control it. But at the same time, I'm an optimist, which is probably my downfall. Is that you always look for the positives in this as well, the humanity. So let's take, for example, that the medicine story. I find that fascinating is that, if you apply AI to medicine, you see this massive, incremental improvement in diagnosis. It's not just a marginal improvement like we've seen. So what would that do to somebody who spent their life trained as a consultant, and a specialist? Effectively, their job's being wiped out.
Entirely.
Yeah. So, and most of those people are men, right? However, nurses, they're the ones now we need more of, right? Because the nurses have what it is, that humanity that, you can't replace with a machine. You can't, you go into those, you see those sort of stories like in Japan where you go into a hotel and there's a robot greeting you and stuff like that. At the end of the day, people don't get fed up with that, right? It's got a novelty factor, but people don't want to be served. If they want human contact, they want human beings. Why is Starbucks popular, right? Yeah, so there's that. So the point is, I guess, the flip side is that the strange impact of this is that, maybe a lot of the jobs where men were highly paid and specialized are going to get taken away, and the ones where women have sort of moved into over the generations will become more in favor. Like the service jobs, like nursing and so on. I think that's an interesting
But even nursing, I think, will change. I don't think the changing bedpans and bandages is going to be replaced. And now you probably are looking at people who have training in bedside counseling or psychology or who knows, poets, who will simply, or musicians.
Comedians.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been laughter actually improves the healing process. We know this to be true.
The other ways of therapy, of alternative medicines. Right, and I think anything that has to do with a human touch would not be replaced. But anything that has to do with an analysis or readings or pattern recognition, that is a little bit easier. But, changing bandages, talking to a patient.
That's the main part, isn't it?
That's the main part,
They're not changing the bandages, they're caring, right? And that's the human aspect you can't replace.
Because it's an engagement of the emotions versus a task being carried out.
Does that come back to your point about freeing us up to do the things we're...
Yeah, because
to
I think
do?
humans are made to connect with one another. And that's
Yeah.
where the fundamentals of trust is, right? We're made to connect with one another. And
Absolutely.
because of the busyness of us needing to do tasks, that's why the human part of us has been removed, because we are just so busy doing the task.
Yeah.
So hopefully that frees us up to be more human.
I hope so, as an optimist. I saw Jim Rogers, he was talking about, what somebody asked him, what would you advise your kids to do? What should they study? Like, should they go into finance like Jim did, in his world? That would be
farming.
Yeah, farming, make stuff. And like the suggestions are coming out, like, even be a chef, because if you remember those sort of movies from the 50s when they had those sort of machines that made dinner and bing, in like 5 seconds and had a little pill.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. It never happened because we wanted the human touch in food, didn't we? Like chefs, in a way, are storytellers, aren't they? If you look at
With food,
Yeah.
sure.
a cookbook.
Yeah.
Cookbooks. Every single cookbook, every ingredient has ever always been done. Nothing new. What's different is the way they package it and tell the story.
Well,
So that's
interesting.
things-
Yeah, on that, there's a reason why cooking shows are so wildly popular because, and you may have hit on something, which is probably because it reminds us of being how it is to be human and what we enjoy. And one of our senses is being delighted by food, taste, it's that sensory perception, which makes us feel less part of the machine. I
Yeah.
think there's something in there.
And then I think also it invokes in us being a maker in creating something and the sense of recognition and pride, which if not, then a day in, day out, you're doing the same thing. It's taken away from you. So I think the whole movement of becoming a maker again it's gaining momentum.
Yeah. I like it. It's very positive. I like this sort of, aspect that comes out of it, because when we talk about AI, it can get quite dark. I was just we're talking about this off air. I was in Hong Kong, and I learnt about there's a court in Guangzhou in China, which is the home of Alibaba. It's a commercial court, so for companies claiming against companies, and up to the value of $500,000, the case will be settled by AI.
No way.
Yeah, yes way. And when I heard that, I'm like,
Together.
what? What did I just hear? It's insane. The fact that they've put so much trust in AI for that. I can't imagine them maybe doing that in like a divorce settlement case, but you can see that happen in the future, right?
I'm amazed by that. I mean, I was just, with a lawyer earlier today on something, and the number of chops and signatures and paper-based here in Singapore, of all places, just blew me away, and all the binders stacked up against the wall, and I thought some things just don't change. I was thinking about your program this evening as I was going through that, saying, are they really at risk, or is this their way of holding on to it by insisting that it be paper-based?
Right.
But in China, the chops are everything. I mean, I recall that if you don't have that physical chop, I don't care how many digital approvals or bank agreements come through, you can't get anything done. I thought that was still the case,
Right.
but not. They're
Not
letting
there.
it go.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is in one city, but there you go. It's just that is the future.
How many cases have they
I
tried?
have no idea.
Oh, I'm just.
I
that's
just
a
learned
great.
about it.
That's a great.
Yeah, it's a
really
great case study.
interesting.
I've got to find out more
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
it.
that's probably just the beginning of
Yeah.
what it can do.
Well, that's the interesting part, isn't it? What they can do, and you could argue that. Well, if you look at it, that if you were a legal secretary or court clerk or even like a judge, it's just spreadsheet work. Therefore, it's all based on case law, isn't it? In theory. So you're just looking at what happened before, matching it, and then
Precedent.
Precedent, right?
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming up with a new principle.
Yeah.
It's not how it works.
Right.
So in theory, AI could do it.
So just like medicine,
Right.
some types of cases that can take the way that the route that it would take, and some not.
Yeah.
I hate to be the curmudgeon on this one, but
Go
can I
on,
just
go
throw
on,
one more thing
Steve,
in
you
on this
have to.
healthcare
That's why
thing?
you're here.
Because I think many ways the hope with healthcare is that it has the potential to drive down the cost of care. And the escalated cost of care is what's terrifying everybody from the U.S. to China and elsewhere.
Right.
But if you look at Siemens, Philips, and all these other companies who have MRIs, scanners, and whatnot, they have made a fortune off basically insisting that more and more diagnostic be done at a higher price, which is ramped it up. Is there the possibility that the more refined we get, those that can afford it will be able to kind of have these high-end AI diagnostic results versus those who don't are left in the cold? And now we have a situation where we've separated the haves from the have-nots through healthcare support. I'm worried about that. I see that. I'm not worried about that. It's a thought.
Yeah.
It's a thought.
It could happen though, right?
It's happened in other industries, in other areas. Why would it not happen with healthcare?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. When money's involved.
That's right.
Absolutely. Well, it's a roller coaster ride tonight of emotions. Humanity,
okay?
AI, tyranny.
Yeah.
So I think, let's come on to this last story, which I really like this story, and I'm glad you brought this one, Cheryl. This is a story about a Vietnamese family firm that said no to Coke. And it wasn't just no to Coke, it was no to Coke's $2.5 billion buyout.
Absolutely, yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about this story?
Well, it's about, I suppose, how a small giant decides to draw their circles and how they will fight their battles. How this young lady who took out the family business and supported her father in saying no to the buyout and building their own brand. So I think there's a lot of, it's heartwarming that they've gone back to first principles, heartwarming that they've gone back to their values and why they're there and who they serve. And that I think what particularly she said that really meant a lot was, if there's no meeting of the minds and there's no shared values, then it is not a partnership.
Yeah.
So I think for all, for anyone or any organizations that's going into a M&A or any form of partnership, that's fundamental. The dollars may make sense and the frameworks may make sense, but when it comes to shared values and it's not the meeting of the minds, then it's probably not going to work out very well.
$2.5 billion makes sense.
Yeah, lots of dollars and cents in there.
Absolutely. There's a lot. That's the tough part. I mean, what kind... I've never been in this situation where somebody's put $2.5 billion on the table and said, right, we'll buy you out. You can ask me later on when this happens. But what sort of thought processes must they go through? Because they must be, especially if she was sort of a second generation business owner, she has to kind of obviously she's responsible to the family, the legacy and so on. But they must be faced with so much doubt and criticism if they were going to turn that down.
I think for perhaps this is fundamentally an Asian-based family-led business, and it's only in its second generation.
Yeah.
So a lot of the legacy and the purpose as to why they're being built, the tears and sweat of those who came together to build the businesses are still there, and to sell out, so-called sell out to a principal who is different from them is not going to make it fly. But however, gaining the momentum from there to bring the business themselves to the next level up, they could see a lot of upside in that. So why do we want to give it up when there's still so much upside to just doing it on our own?
Interesting. Yeah, they've got plans, haven't they? I was just reading through what they're planning.
Yeah.
They've actually
a couple of $1 billion in by 2027.
Yeah, it's like one of those. It was like approaching Facebook in the early days. It's like we don't need $2.5 billion. We're going to be worth $25 billion, right? So I thought it phenomenal as well. And their plans were to take their drinks company, which they are, to the US as well.
Yes. By end of this year, they're going to set up out in the US, where so-called their main competitor is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think they're going to set up in Atlanta, but that would be interesting. Yeah, I mean, do we see these kind of stories in Asia? It's sort of like there's a lot of these family businesses, isn't there? And they're in sort of very unexciting businesses as well. They tend to be retail or real estate or
manufacturing.
Yeah.
I would say, I did a lot of work with private equity and helping place talent into portfolio companies across the region. That's most of what I've been doing the last 4 years. And I would say from all of the tales and all of my engagements, 8 out of 10 times a deal failed in Southeast Asia, not for money reasons or financial reasons, but for cultural reasons. The family just turned around and said, you don't get us.
Yeah.
It happens a lot.
Wow.
And nobody talks about it. I mean, no, you don't want to talk about the failed deals or the things that they go through, but boy, they get the private equity guys talking, and they'll ring your ear over how many failed deals they've been through because of this very issue.
Yeah, when I work with family businesses, when we bring in a management partner, that's one of the key pieces that we will look at. It's whether there's a cultural and there's a values fit. So that, at the end of the day, you want the business to continue to flourish. We have, however, had situations where we have the second and third generation leadership come in, and they put a sexy spin to the family business, and it takes off, right? So it can go either ways in this world.
Yeah, or the third generation comes in and basically they don't know what it is to build a business, and grandpa has done it, and they screw it up. And in many cases, some of the sales that are out there is because, the first generation says, I don't think, little Jimmy's ready for this. And I got to get out now for the sake of the family. There's a lot of that goes on.
Yeah. When you hear the story, I mean, somebody might say, some people might argue that it's sort of traditional, old-fashioned. You might have argued that, if you went to Europe and many of the fashion houses didn't want to upgrade and bring themselves into the future. They were family-run businesses and they didn't want to get with the times and the new consumer. There's that as well. But at the same time, given what we talked about before, with cutting-edge innovation, we've got AI, big data, very inhuman aspects, and that aspect of control. This is quite heartwarming, isn't it? Quite sort of reassuring, is that at the end of the day, it's people, and they're saying, look, this doesn't work for us.
Yeah, I also think that the fact, if I read the article correctly, they had already succeeded in going cross-border, which is actually a very difficult thing for many, single country, family-run businesses. They may do great in their own market, but they typically, or not typically, but many times do fail when they go over. They were already expanding into 4, 5, 6 markets. And like you pointed out, Cheryl, they had ambitions and plans to go to the U.S., where there's huge, Asian populations and communities that, welcome and understand and appreciate their products. So they were already on their way. I think Coke got to them late would be my argument.
Right.
I think they probably came in too late.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sales were up, right? And as well, do you think there's anything interesting in this about being a Vietnamese company? Because we don't really sort of see... know much about Vietnamese companies outside of Vietnam, and the fact is where Vietnam is right now in terms of its growth cycle. I find it quite fascinating. A lot of it's family business, isn't it? There's a lot of development work going out to Vietnam as well at the moment.
Yeah.
So there's like a real sort of interesting flashpoint happening right now. You've got this emerging, very young and surprisingly very worldly population there.
Yes.
They're very open to outside.
It's similar to in the past, like Indonesian family businesses, or China related family businesses. Second, third generation comes back, new inputs, new insights, and then they take off, right? And then the challenge is, however, convincing the founders that that's the right bus to get on.
Exactly, that is the challenge. I mean, with these sort of these younger founders, I think they have to prove themselves a little bit as well. So, this is
because in that story and in most family-run business in Asia, they learn grounds up. Still. Yeah.
Just out of interest, we talked about 8 out of 10 like family businesses, and those sort of mergers or acquisitions.
It's anecdotal, but that's my impression.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, point being is that a lot of these happen. That they don't fall through because of culture. What was the Coke situation? Does anybody know what the issue was, why they sort of turned them down? What would it have been, do you think?
Why they turned down Coke?
Yeah.
Again, it's just the reading, but I did, between the lines, it looked like they came in with the impression that they wanted to partner.
Yeah.
And then it turned out when they went back to Atlanta, the CEO said, no, in fact, we just want to take you over.
Oh, right, okay.
So it was a point of pride, is how I read the article, but that was my take.
Yeah. Exactly, because it happened after, as far as I remember, they went back to Atlanta and obviously they found out this was the real deal. But I find that quite encouraging, given what we talked about tonight. At the end of the day, family businesses, human beings make the decision, and it's not always about the money. It's a bit of leadership as well, I think, isn't it? I mean, would you call that leadership?
Yeah, I would certainly say that, because they made a stand, basically, as to where the business would go and what it meant to their team and the people that were working with them in the firm. That's leadership. That's showing the pride in the work that they do and what they do value as an organization.
You've seen some of these job surveys coming out too, and they're talking about levels of engagement of employees, and they're finding increasingly that companies aren't responding to the fact that people don't work for the company and the product or the service. They work for the people that they want to be with and be in the company of, and that is the determining factor. Yet, the amount of investment that's going into people and developing and team growth and development is plummeting, while actually investment in product or capital costs is rising.
Yeah.
So they're not getting it. There's something that's missing here. So, but the people factor is central to all of these businesses.
Yeah. Where do you think, on that note, because we've sort of brought it up a little bit, is that what are the skills that, let's say you were a teenager listening to this and you're thinking, oh, what am I going to do when I grow up? What are the skills that they should learn? Because, would it be smart for them to go and be a lawyer and spend all that money?
Okay, we can answer that one quickly.
Right, off the bat.
No.
Just no.
To go through probably one of the toughest, training programs and most expensive.
So I just ran into a guy the other day who's built an AI and a business where he's cranking out massive amounts of data and data sets and bypassing the whole advertising agency, disintermediating them entirely.
Right.
And he looked at me and he said, for a while we all thought what we needed is more data scientists. And everyone was saying, where are we going to find data scientists? How can we grow them on trees? He said, the last thing we need is more data scientists. He said, we've already moved past that. What we need are basically commercially minded, lateral thinker, right brain people who can visualize what that data means and how to apply it in a commercial or non-commercial context to get a result. He was just like, I don't get why everyone's banging on about, be an engineer and your life is fixed. No, machines are taking that over. They're coming.
Absolutely.
It's the ability to see the picture and be able to articulate that. And that basically is what leadership is about, isn't it?
That's
to
right.
see the future and be able to articulate it and bring people along.
Yes.
So if you ask me, get your people skills, relational skills, in mental toughness is much needed. And go out to the field of play and live life, because only then you are different from a machine.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't argue with that. That is awesome. I love this conversation, but I'm aware of the time. We'll have to bring it to a close. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you to my guests who've been wonderful in the stories they brought tonight and the discussion. Cheryl Liew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, pleasure.
And for making it all the way from Hong Kong today, gracing us with your presence. Steve Stein, thank you so much.
Love it. Thanks
Battled
so much.
your way through traffic to get here today, but you made it. Yeah. And big shout out to you guys as well. Obviously, check out the Inside Asia podcast.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we'll put details in the show notes. Thoroughly recommended. I think you go into a lot more detail on the more sort of the meta stories as well.
Yeah, trend-based.
Yeah.
Why is Asia changing and why is it different is the theme.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, your
Nice.
background as a writer and as a journalist
Nice.
as well really comes out. So I really like that. And there's not a lot of people in this space doing that.
Right. Big stories everywhere, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that is Steve. We'll check out his podcast. And Cheryl, yourself, you're prolific author as well. I know, depending on when this goes out as well, you may have published another book. You've got a few in the pipeline. Do you want to share your latest book, the one that you've already published?
Okay, the one that's published is called The 24-Hour Woman.
Yeah.
You can grab a copy of that at the24hourwoman.com. Upcoming, of course, with Graham as my producer, we'll be producing a podcast around the 24-Hour Woman show.
Yeah.
And the other show is called Leadership Matters for Asia. Yeah, so it's going to be leadership conversations.
Great.
Which I feel is much needed here, because the philosophy around how Asian leadership might be different. Is there a difference in terms of Asian leadership and Western leadership, or is just leadership in general? So those are the interesting conversations and the people that we will have in the room.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Love it. This is Asia Matters. You can check us out as asiamatters.show. We are on iTunes. We are coming on Spotify, all the usual platforms. Live on YouTube as well. You can check us out there. Graham Brown signing out from the Asia Tech Podcast Studio.